Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to the 10th Game Design Variety Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Johnston. Thanks very much for joining me today. I see some people already here. Hi, Bess. How are you going? Glad you could make it. Yeah, it's. I know it's sometimes a bit of a tricky time with working hours and things. And we've got Alex. Hey, welcome. Thanks very much for coming along. Hope everyone's well. It's been a week, a little bit longer than usual. I was away for the weekend in the mountains of the Czech Republic, which was very nice. We got some snow, but consequently, I thought probably not. The internet probably wasn't quite up to streaming quality, so I thought I would give it a quick break. But I'm back. Hey Rob, how you going? Thanks for dropping by. So how's everyone's week been? It's getting really cold here. I know there's been some snow in the UK. I'm not sure what it's like in other parts of the world. And just sort of still, normal sort of balancing full-time job in game design and all that kind of good stuff. So today I think I'll be recapping a little bit about what the week's been like in week of a game designer kind of thing. And then later on we'll get on to sort of the main topic for today, which is talking about contracts and negotiations with game publishers, which hopefully might be interesting to people. Hey Mandela, welcome. So that was but otherwise let me know what you've been up to over the week, or what games you've been playing. Always fun to sort of know what people have been up to. I guess I've got my Earl Grey tea. I'll try and remember to actually drink more than I normally do on stream. I always end a little bit kind of a bit thirsty, so I should remember. So I guess I can again, great professionalism of what is the thinking back of the week of a game designer. Bass is saying it is getting cold, hoping for a cold winter. I agree actually. I remember it's a bit strange for me because sort of every 2 years I'm in Australia, and one every 2 years I'm in the Czech Republic, so I swing from 42 degrees to 0 and freezing, and so I never quite get a sense of what's normal anymore. But I know we haven't had much snow in Prague in the last few winters, really, and the fact that we already had a little bit in Prague itself the last few days is encouraging. So I'm hopeful, but we'll see. Rob's been doing some playtesting. Did a Snails and Grails rules audit, which is very productive. What do you mean by a rules audit? I have to admit, it's something a term I've never come across in game design. I assume it's something to do with going over the rules of a game, but it'd be interesting to hear what that actually entails, Rob, if you had a chance. Yes, and as I was saying on Ross More Games Please stream, we mentioned skiing and things, and I don't know. I think I may be skiing this winter if they open up the slopes, I guess, but that's a rather perilous thought for me. I much prefer the kind of like board games and hot wine inside aspect of like being on the snow rather than actually skiing. I'm sorry to hear that, Alex. I'm sorry I should have read the whole thing before I said, but glad that your test came out negative. So excellent. Was impressed with the rule book. What rule book? Have I missed something? Maybe. So this is getting back to Rob's rules audit. Worked through the written rules and discussed it all to ensure the written rules matched how we play the game. So at what point in the process did you start writing the rules? I guess because it's interesting because there are 3 of you working on the game. So I guess making all of the different versions in your head make sense is a bit tricky. Maybe, I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to hear about that. Nausea, believe me, it's not. It's not. So my fiance is Czech, and she's an excellent skier and actually more of a snowboarder now. And I remember first time we went in the Czech Republic skiing, she just would snowboard behind me and film me the whole time, mainly falling over. I even fell over on a ski lift kind of somehow, which is everyone thought was a bit ridiculous. But yeah, it's I have to admit it's a bit more stressful than I haven't got over the kind of like the fear barrier part of it. So who knows? Oh, I see. Sorry, the rules for the COVID test Alex was talking about. You get a pamphlet of instructions, take the test. So it started with a complete list, went through the whole. I'm guessing it's not a particularly fun game, but it's interesting. So I guess, and with visual references, they're trying to be kind of language independent. It's always interesting. I mean, rules in games you can't. I think I saw somewhere on Twitter somebody was saying they'd love to do some game rules in the style of like the IKEA instructions for furniture, you know, completely language independent with pictograms and things like that. I haven't seen many examples. I guess probably some children's games that can do this, but it's an interesting way if you can do it. It really helps out. Rob with Snails and Growls has been writing the rules since the beginning, but not really suitable for third-party use. Okay, yeah. So you're sort of getting to the stage of sort of cleaning up the rules, making sure they're sort of readable by other people, maybe thinking about blind play testing and things like that. Yeah, that's good. I have to admit, I'm still not great about writing around the rules, but I'm definitely trying to get better, especially with co-designs, virtual co-designs where you're not meeting with the other person, but you're only meeting online, trying to have a rules document early to make sure you're sort of agreeing on things, and also trying to take notes of all the playtest sessions and really like think about what's the thing you're going to change for the next version, because I've definitely had a few tests where you go off and sort of playtest something, you come back, and sometimes it just ends up, because it's hard to meet up with people, you take 2 weeks to get back to them, and then you realize that you forgot what you were, you know, what was the direction you were going to take the game in. So it's always good to, I tend to keep that with the rules now. It just seems to be the easy way. Manuel, hey Manuel, that's nice to hear. And congrats on your new release, the I'm forgetting, like Empires of Sin, right? It's a new PC game, Empires of Sin. I think that's what it's called. Congrats on. I saw that was released this week. Looks amazing. Looks really, really, really cool. So yeah, congrats on that. Let's get with an Egyptian team. They did have one rulebook style like hieroglyphs. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I think it's any way you can do it. Oh, I got it right. Empire. Only one Empire of Sin. Yeah, and yeah, Lego does this well. That's true. That's true. It's been a really long time since I've done any Lego. I saw Tony Boydell's blog where he got the Millennium Falcon set and was making it, and I have to admit I was a bit tempted. I was very into these kind of Rube Goldberg, you know, great ball contraptions for a little while. So I was thinking about getting back into Technic and things like that. I haven't seen a Lego Lego rulebook, a Lego manual for quite some time. Yeah, Rob's talking online docs collaboration being essential. Yeah, when you don't see each other. Yeah, I have to admit it's something I'm still having to adapt to and get better at, and taking proper notes, or at least notes in a more permanent place. I tend to now. I used to just grab a bit of paper when we'd be playing. You know, you'd be playing with Tabletop Simulator and you need something to be writing down. I just grab a spare bit of paper and start scrolling, and then you realize you have 10 bits of paper. It doesn't really help you keep track of different things. So I've at least tried to grab my notebook each time and now write while I'm on the computer, because it's like too many windows to have. I should just have a text document up as well, but that would be too organized for me, wouldn't it, really? Hey, Bram, how are you going? Good morning to you. We were talking about, are you getting snow where you are in the world? We've had some snow here in Europe this week, which has been quite nice. Yeah, so, well, what's the week been like is the question. It's been an interesting mix of things on the game design front. Still actively working on the adventure games. I'll be drafting the first part of the new the 6th scenario this weekend, hopefully. We had a really good meet, like finalizing different characters and some ideas of puzzles and things that we want to put in the game. So that will be my weekend work. It's always a interesting task. I was sort of reflecting on today. So many things in the game design world, you know, you get, especially at the point where I'm at, I've been doing this, you know, for 10 years or something, and you get very used to doing certain things, so you get better at them. But I realize for the adventure games, you know, it's still a relatively small number of them that I've done. So even now when I sit down, it's like you're learning a new language or something, or a new process, and it always takes me longer than I would think, you know, kind of willing something completely new into being. So I'm excited to work on something new, but also a little bit of trepidation thinking about yeah, like the kind of the how much work it is. So that'll be it. Bram said no snow. It's actually warm here in Minnesota. That 30 degrees. That's still negative Celsius, right? But yeah, I've heard that Minnesota is quite cold. Yeah, strolled through it. I'm not sure what that was talking about actually, but yeah. So that's one thing. I had a really nice a few meetings with various scheduled. I can apologize on stream to Mandela. We were supposed to try and catch up, but we couldn't quite fit it out. Maybe Mandela, you want to join me on stream 1 week, and we can have like an open kind of game design play test or something if you're interested, and if the stream would be interested. Mandela and I are working on a sort of a dice placement game, which is really actually, yeah, like really quickly sort of come together. And the other thing I was potentially going to talk about today was, you know, when do you shelve an idea or when do you keep working on an idea? Sometimes early on the process, for whatever reason, something just sticks out immediately that you're like, oh, that's the cool little bit. And we've reached that part with Mandela quite quickly, which I should say is mostly down to Mandela. Mandela had already a really good core idea, and we even just tried it out like in a very basic one, tabletop simulator, and already you get the feeling of like making plans, and you're thinking about different strategies or tactics, or even before you've sort of built out all the systems, or made sure there are long-term goals, or that you're already getting a little bit of tension. You're getting a bit of like, oh, I could do this action, then I'm going to do this action next turn. I think when that planning brain starts kicking in, you know that the game's doing something right, because you sort of can carry out those plans. But on the other hand, I was this morning meeting with Mark Paquin, who's designer of Treasure Island, the French designer I've mentioned before. We're also working on a new idea, and that's kind of gone in the opposite direction. Where we also had a kind of cool core idea, and we tried it out this morning, and it's missing that kind of, we realized very quickly that it's missing a little bit of something, je ne sais quoi or whatever. And you realize at the point that you actually really have to kind of step back and go, okay, well, what is this actually idea even worth pursuing? And I think it's interesting. It's just an interesting process about how different designers approach that moment. Like, do you sort of push through it and just keep iterating and like doggedly keep going on that idea, or do you go, okay, actually, we're not that attached to it. We don't have to keep working on it if we don't want it. We've only done one very, very small prototype or something. It's tricky because it's almost like a gut feeling. Like, how do you know that this idea is going to work out? How do you not know? So yeah, it's interesting that these two designs have sort of started at about the same time, and one's sort of taken a really about the same amount of time worked on each, and one's already feeling a lot more promising. But that's just the nature of things, and we'll see what happens there. Also working on a game with Trevor Benjamin and David Thompson of Undaunted fame, who are former Cambridge playtest group members. I've released a game with Trevor called Light and Dark quite a few years ago, a very small sort of dexterity-based game, but never done something with David, and actually never designed a game as 3 people. So that's also been interesting. We've been playing on Tabletop Simulator. We're trying to combine deck building and sort of cubes and trains games, things like Irish Gauge. I might have talked about it before on stream. And we're really at the moment trying to, actually, it's almost a theoretical question of how do you make sure that you have, like, with that, we know what the goal is, so that it's not so much a question of like, do we proceed with this idea or not? We know what we want to do, but it's making sure that those things remain in the design. As you play, you want to simplify things, you want to change things, but then you realize, hey, we wanted to set out by making, both of these styles, deck building plus this sort of cubes and trains and shares kind of game. So you have to make sure, not to lose sight of that, I guess, in the iterative process. And we're now at the point of sort of stepping back and thinking about it. I haven't been looking at, We'll see, Amanda. It seems already there's a few people who might be interested. But it'll be interesting, I think, just to anyway, we could show it off. It's one of those. It's always tricky when you talk about these designs in the abstract. So we can maybe do a brief 5-minute little pitch to the audience maybe, or something like that. Could be fun. Alex asks, how do I generally start a collaboration? I pester people. I really do just get in contact with people, or I've met them at conventions. Sometimes we're talking about different things. Mandela, do you remember how we've known each other? We've met a few times at different events and things. Oh, sorry, you're talking. Oh no, whoops, no, too many. I've missed the wrong thing. Whoops. Yeah, I don't know how do we get on to just like deciding to design something together? Did you reach out to me and just email me or something like that? I know we'd sort of chatted about game design generally and some other aspects of the industry. Yeah, Mandela, there we go. Good. Mandela reached out to me. So yeah, I mean, sometimes it's one or the other way, and you just say, I'm interested in designing something, and you start. I guess I don't have. There's not a better. Again, it's sort of different for every collaboration and different for the different relationships with different people. But just very open. And I find if you're trying to start a new collaboration, it's usually good to come with something, I guess, that you are able to contribute something to the collaboration kind of immediately, or to sort of. I don't know if it makes much sense to sort of reach out to someone and say, I want to work with you, but I don't know about what. I think things move more quickly if you go, okay, or whatever, each other, and I've got this idea that I think would be great to work on with you. Maybe a quick pitch of the idea. Do you mind if we discuss it? And then you've started. Like, even if that initial idea very quickly is discarded for whatever reason, I think it's starting that process of talking to each other and getting into some sort of flow. And like with Mark, with the French designer, we may end up. We at least know that we want to meet, once every couple of weeks. And even if we don't end up keep working on this game, then we'll start on something else. But we know we want to work together. I mean, that's I think for me ultimately now it's much more about I want to work with people. It's not that necessarily it has to be a particular game or like it's not project led. It's designer led. It's like kind of relationship led, if that makes sense. Manila said, I think you followed a chat. We were having about something else, and it was Matt's chatting about co-design. So maybe that's why it's like some Inception style thing at this point where I talk about co-designing so much everywhere that it puts the seeds into everyone else that they should be co-designing, and they associate me with co-designing. So they reach out to me, and that's how all these co-designs happen. I have to admit, and it's interesting. Mandela can give me feedback on stream. I try to be upfront, but I'm maybe not as good as I should be. But it can be tough managing so many different co-designs. It's one thing to manage a lot of your own projects and things like that. But when you've got a lot of co-designs going at the same time, especially games which are very early on in the stage, like where I find you're often using the most kind of creative energy, you're really thinking about, nothing's certain about the game, a lot of things can change. When you've got multiple of those going on and with different people, I find that quite tricky still. And I'm very, very bad at saying yes far too often. I'm very happy to, and it's often a positive thing. But I hope that my co-designers are not too, are not too annoyed with me for, sometimes I'm not enough like in on a project. Like when I'm there and playtesting, I'm there, but it's just balancing lots of different projects, and there's only so much time in the day, and there's existing things with publishers, like with the adventure games, for example, you have kind of deadlines you've got to hit for other projects, so it kind of depends week to week how things go. But but it's a fun thing, and definitely during these kind of times, it's a good way to be able to chat to people and just keep in touch. I mean, there's other designers like Theo Rivera, also great streamer. If you speak French, unfortunately, he streams in French. But we just like meeting once every 2 weeks, even just to chat, just as a kind of a social thing, and then we'll talk about co-designs at various points. We have various projects going in. Mandela said, "Oh, it's clear, especially with a full-time job commit." Okay, good. I'm glad. I'm not always. Sometimes I'm too. you're excited about the co-design, and I don't want it to start, to feel too like a business relationship for I have to set out a list of terms and conditions before we start working with each other or whatever. It's a little too much. But yeah, for anybody who really is interested in co-designing, it is interesting actually. For me, it's now so natural. I've done it so much. I'm still surprised, and no reason to be surprised, by how many designers who are not intimidated, but that's not a normal thing that they would think of doing, collaborating on design. And I would just say give it a go. I think it's you're not really going to lose anything. You'll at least learn some new skills usually, or learn new ways of thinking about things, because another person's always going to think in a bit of a different way that you do. Even if you don't manage to finish a game, or it even doesn't go very far, I think you'll enrich. It's a good way to kind of get to know more people in your community or in your circles, or even to kind of widen those. Is if you're able, there's no reason why you can't design with someone on the other side of the world. And when it works well, it's fantastic. You really get the benefits of two minds working on a project, two sets of inputs, got someone else to talk about the project. It's I think it's a really great experience, and a really nice social experience, for what can be often kind of quite a solitary pursuit. I guess the reason also kind of related to why I stream and why I'm enjoying it. It changes game design from a solitary thing to having a bit of a community and chatting with people, or kind of chatting via chat, so to speak. So apart from that, and the other kind of not big news, I guess, but news is that it looks like I've signed another game, or at least a publisher has reached out, who I had shown a game to during Essen, or kind of not during Essen, but around Essen time, via a kind of a virtual pitch, via Skype. And they've played it a bunch, and they like it, and they would like to sign it if possible. And I kind of wanted to. This only happened yesterday, and we haven't made a decision yet. And it prompted me to sort of think that we, it would be an interesting thing to chat on stream, because even my own perception of this experience has changed a lot. And I've gotten some really great advice from other designers over the years, people I really respect, with more experience than me. So I thought it could be an interesting thing to chat about. So I guess that kind of probably segues into, away from the week in the life event. A lot of projects, a lot of deadlines at the moment. That's generally the current kind of place of things. A lot to do. Those who will remember from last week, the Hitman. We played Hitman, my new Hitman prototype on stream, a co-design with Dave Neal. Also going well. Still a bunch of bugs. And a lot of things I have to fix. That's also very much on my list of things to do, because we're still hoping to have it maybe before Christmas in a state that you could show to a publisher, or at least kind of sit down and go through it without it completely breaking. And not only not breaking, but also showing exactly what you want the game to be. And I did some mentoring. I'm part of the mentoring, the tabletop mentoring program. So I've got 2 mentees, and I did one of those this week, and I missed one of my mentees, unfortunately, because I had traveled, but I'm catching up with that this weekend. So and Rob has to say, limited experience of collaboration has been very positive. That tends to be my thinking of it as well. And thanks for the congratulations. Although we'll see, as I will discuss, it's still something a bit open. So without much further ado, signing a board game. What are some things to think about? What are your experiences? And also, for those who have signed any games, feel free to drop things about your thoughts about the experience, or what do you think? What did you learn? Were there any regrets looking back on it? Were there things you wish you'd sort of changed about the experience? Anything like that you think, or questions you have about the experience? Please drop that in chat. Let's make this sort of a discussion, not just about me. And Alex has been part of the mentorship program. So you have a mentor, or you have a mentee? Are you mentoring, or are you a mentee, Alex? Yeah, it's a really, really great program. There'll be new signups, I think, Probably around Christmas or like in the new year, because I think the current session, they usually go for 3 months, a mentoring, kind of session, and they finish this, we're finishing like in the next couple of weeks. So for those who are interested, get involved with that. I will find I'll flag it up, I'll show it. But I think if you just put tabletop mentoring program into Google, you'll find it. It's the first thing that pops up. Yeah. So I can show that off. Where should I share this screen? That one. Yeah, this is the mentorship program. Someone's saying that it starts again in January. So yeah, I would reach out. You can probably you may be able to sign up already. Yeah, enrollment's currently closed and open in January 2021. I'm not sure if there's a way that you can be, I guess you could click on this probably, or if you wanted to be a mentor or mentee, you might, oh yes, okay, you can, it looks like you can sign up. Oh, sorry, this is still hidden by my stupidly large banner, and I'll hide this. So it looks like you can, if you want to be a mentor or a mentee, you can still sign up, but probably that'll mean, you'll be put on the list and then they'll email you in January. So would encourage anybody to check that out if they're interested in that. Manuel said something I missed. Had a negative experience for the last 2 years. What, I mean, was there a particular, like, I mean, I understand you might not want to elaborate on it that much, but is there anything particular that sort of stood out as the kind of defining negative part of that experience? Yeah. Hey Joe, how you going? I see you. Sneak away as you would. Alex says he does have a mentor. Okay, helping with narrative design. Okay, cool, very cool. Okay, yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah. Hi Robert, how you going? I don't think I've seen you on Twitch. Thanks for joining. Designers and publishers are in many different countries. Are there any difficulties or problems that occur with entering into cross-border publishing agreements? Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. So yeah, I've signed contracts. So, when I first signed my contracts, I was based in the UK, although I have a I have a particularly complicated kind of experience with all this because I was Australian on a student visa and then a work visa in the UK. More recently now, I'm on a residency permit in the Czech Republic while still working in the UK and still being Australian. The main things are for taxation, realistically. Those are the main complications. And that's, going to be dependent on where you live, like your own taxation kind of, things that you have to worry about. But generally it's pretty smooth, realistically. Like the form of the contract will be different because the kind of legal requirements in different countries, like French contracts, for example, at least in my experience, seem to be very, very long. Like you have to be very sort of verbose and exact in French law, which means you have to have these 15-page contracts. Whereas in the US, it seems like anything goes. I've had like a 1-page contract in the US before. A few other things, like in Germany, for example, often you'll have to sign you'll have to get your own tax authority to sign like a statement saying that you pay tax in that country. Otherwise, they'll withhold some VAT automatically from royalty payments. But these are kind of things to you kind of deal with them as they come along. I'm not sure if there's anything you kind of have to go into, before. And if you've got any questions, I'd recommend getting an accountant if you have any, depending on your own kind of personal situation. But it's mainly for tax is the main thing that can add to that. Manuel wants to get back. Oh yeah, sorry, this was to do with your negative experience. An abusive, oh gosh. Yeah, oh God, wow, okay, that sounds really rough. I'm not sure if I guess I'll cover it so much today, because I suppose I'll be probably talking more about the kind of the very initial point of from maybe, a publisher says, I'm interested in the game through to the point of actually signing it. And obviously you're talking about the part a bit after that. But it's an interesting discussion because it's also, we hear more and more in the kind of game design world talking about development and the role of development and how is that different from design. And and talking about wanting more and more work from designers, it blurs this line of like, at what point does is the publisher responsible for doing what they should be doing on the game, and when does the designer's job end? That's something in contracts that some people talk about. There are kind of like design goals in contracts now. I haven't seen that very often, but that's something to keep an eye on. But no, it seems really rough. And so they took a contract for a game and turned them into 2 different games, which I designed from scratch. That's not, well, that's absolutely not what you signed up for. Do you mind me asking? Did you get an advance at least? I mean, that's something I guess I will talk about. But I think more and more, the one thing that's crystallized more and more in my mind as I do this is that, yeah, like getting an advance, even if it doesn't cover the kind of, unfortunately, it doesn't really cover, the kind of the emotional toll, and if the project doesn't work out, it certainly doesn't cover it. But it's kind of the very least. Oh, there was no advance. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I think it's a really rough thing. It doesn't really safeguard against this. Obviously, like you could get an advance and still things go badly, but at least I think it's something that I'm not pushing it myself as a plan, but I think the really thing, it's really something that should, if it's not standard, because it isn't standard, as there are a lot of publishers who don't do advances, but it really should be absolutely standard. There are so many things can go wrong, yeah, you need to push them for royalties, which they've only paid a portion of. Yeah, that's sort of like the what is it, shut up and pay me kind of thing about freelancers is always tough, and designers definitely fall into that thing. No, you're not derailing my stream. No, it's good to get, like, yeah, I mean, this is a community. It's not just about me, and it's yeah, I'm also happy to chat off stream if you ever wanted to about this series. I'm happy to help. I've also had certainly less than great experiences with publishers, and even with current projects. So you wish it were very rare, but unfortunately it definitely does happen. Yeah, as Rob said, at advance is many things. I mean, it is definitely a show of good faith. It's a bit of an insurance policy. Unfortunately, and in the most kind of pragmatic or cynical way, it's a way of making sure you get at least some money out of the game, because when you sign a game, there's no guarantee that it actually will be published. Unfortunately, a lot of things can go wrong, and yeah, it's not just a show of good faith. It shows like a serious attitude on the part of the publisher, like if they're making some financial investment into the project, and that they show, especially as it's also becoming more and more common for projects to have very long lead times. Like you're looking at like 2+ years from when you sign a game. So it's the least that you're giving them the design for this amount of time. I think the least to do is to get an advance on royalties. Yeah, it's up there with like the most important things that I tell people to make sure that you have included. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a very large sum of money. Definitely advances. I've got advances from like the £250 range all the way up to like €5,000 range. I'd say this high end is very rare. A very small publisher obviously can't offer very large sums, but I think something in the range of £250 to €500 is I think quite reasonable, and shows like seriousness on all parties. Yeah, it's a smaller. Just don't want to burn bridges in the end, but I have to refuse some. No, absolutely, you have to. It's a tricky thing, and game designers, we're not like unionized or anything, right? It's a difficult industry because it's. I sometimes feel very much that it's kind of like a buyer's market. I don't know. It would be interesting to see the kind of the publisher side, but I get the sense that there are a lot more games out there that people are designing than there are kind of slots to be published. It's not to say that all those designs are of equal quality, but you do sometimes feel a bit of a pressure of like, well, that like that you can't negotiate things, and that's what I'd like to talk a little bit about today. That I think you do have a bit more power than you think. But yeah, but it is quite difficult. Yeah, Rob's talking about did not include advance, never see us one, and said sure. Yeah, I mean, and that's in the absolute that's like a really good example of how it can work. I think it is worth assuming that publishers are acting in good faith most of the time. It is very, like, you do have bad experiences. It's very rare that it's like intentionally malicious. Sometimes it could just be very negligent, which can be just as damaging. But yeah, the best publishers, they just, you know, they react to feedback really well. And yeah, sometimes it's just pointing out. And there are other things with contracts that, you know, most publishers, when you point them out, they go, oh yeah, that's fair enough. We'll make sure we put that in contract. Yes, it's fine to play in advance. So yeah. So, I mean, what I wanted to talk about is, yeah, go from, you've been emailed from a publisher saying they want to publish your game. Where do you go from there? So at the very early part of my career, you know, I didn't, you know, you don't think, because it's your first time, you're really excited, you're amazed that someone wants to publish your game. That is such a huge moment, and I don't ever want to take away from that. I think definitely enjoy it and make the most of it. It's a really special feeling, especially for your first few games. And yeah, you don't think about, you know, it's like, where can I sign? Like, so, you know, when Days of Wonder offered me a contract for Relic Runners, like, you didn't have to bend my arm. Like, you know, they can do whatever they want, you know, like, and it's not to say that I, you know, of course, read the contract and got a little bit of advice on, you know, various things to make sure they're in the contract. Days of Wonder are great, very experienced, very fair, more than fair, very, you know, a great working partner. So I was very lucky to have like a really good relationship to as my first one. But as I've gone on, you know, I think you start to realize that rushing into things is, you know, not the best way to do these things, especially, and I think this has become more pronounced. You know, you have to realize that, you know, obviously everyone has a different goal for their game when you want to get it published, but often that design is only going to get one chance, you know, realistically. Not so many things are even reprinted, let alone republished. Like, you know, if it's been published by somebody and someone else to republish it years down the road, that very rarely happens. So, you know, you want to give it the best shot. And to that end, I think there are a few things to think about that are worth kind of negotiating or just discussing with the publisher. I think that's the main thing that I have adjusted in my thinking to be, instead of going, you know, waiting for a publisher to come and say, I'm going to publish this game, and then me going, oh yes, thank you, great, let's do it. It's, you know, a publisher saying, want to publish a game, and the first reaction then is like, okay, great, thank you, that's a really nice thing, I'm glad you enjoyed the game. Can we have a discussion to talk about not only the contract, but also how you see that you're going to publish the game? What's your vision for the game? What are your direction, your plans? These can be like plans for, you know, graphics or components or even like marketing. The more you can discuss before you even enter the contract negotiation, this is even before that, it's a really important discussion, and it's something I would have never thought at the very start. And people like Bruno Cathala were probably, I think, the people who really made me take it seriously. Bruno has many stories. He can be quite forceful with publishers now. You know, he has strong opinions, and he knows how games want to be. But he's very adamant about it. You know, it's your design as well. You're as much involved as the publisher is, and you know, especially at the start, that's where you have the most power, really, to have that conversation. And like, sort of talking about sort of agency, the other kind of little bit of advice or thing to think about is that while it is true that a lot of people designing games, and a lot, you know, publishers get pitched hundreds and thousands of games a year, by the time they get to the point where they email you or call you or whatever to say that they're interested in your game, they've already invested actually quite a bit of time in your game. Now, that's not to say that you can act like an idiot and demand the world, but it's just to say that, you know, I don't think you should feel bad that you have some position to negotiate or to discuss or to try and reach some sort of compromise or joint vision for the game, because they've already invested some time in it. You know, I think it's quite unlikely if you know, if you turn around, if you know, you can say more than just yes. You can say, oh, can we chat about it? I'm not sure about these things. Can we think about a vision? Most publishers will be very receptive to that, and they'll want to still sign your game because that they want that design. They've already, again, put the time in to do that. And so, yeah, with this publisher who's emailed me, we've set up a discussion for next week. We're going to Skype. I've signed a game with them before, although that game hasn't been released yet. It's going to be released next year. So I don't have a sort of a prior, like I haven't seen the whole process with this publisher yet. And yeah, I think some of the things that are important to chat about now are what's their vision for the game? Like the market's so crowded as it is, and things like marketing and components and art are more and more important than ever before. The more you can be involved and like get a sense of what the publisher is thinking, the better it'll be. So I mean, this game is actually, it's a flip and fill style game. So there's already a kind of a particular market for those games. There's a particular, how is it going to fit into that market? How are you going to differentiate? Like what sort of price point do you think the game could be? Like I have a very strong feeling that I want it to be a sort of a mostly quite accessible game. I don't want it to be really expensive. I think it's a light experience, but it's a nice kind of replayable experience. I quite enjoy it a lot. It's something similar to say Metro X, this kind of weight of game. And I want to go in and discuss and say, actually, like I see this as being something accessible, in the kind of like 20 euro, 15 to 20 euro kind of range. I think it would be a real pity if they in their head are going like, oh, we see this like a 40 euro game. Alex says no miniatures. Well, but exactly. But I don't know. Maybe this publisher is thinking, oh, we have some idea. Actually, it could be have a bit more table presence. Maybe you could have like plastic to do, not plastic miniatures, but plastic to do other things in the game, and that would necessitate a higher price point. And I'm not sure if I agree with that or not, but I'd like to have a discussion to see if we align on where we think the game could be. There's also, it's a game that can have multiple maps essentially, and I'd love to make sure that like there are 2 in the maps. I'd love dry erase boards, for example. I really like that as a sort of, it's a really nice component of the game. It also makes the game really easy to kind of like transport. That's my personal preference. Also with this particular game, it's a game where the pens have different colors. That's kind of a little bit of the twist of the flip and fill kind of thing. So I think that could look really good. It's just sounding out what it's trying to get in, it's just any sort of discussion like meet the minds. I have something in my head which I see the product. They've played it without me there, so maybe they're having discussions about the game don't match what I'm thinking. So yeah, the very first stage is just like, what do we see the product being, and do we agree with this? Manny was saying it's one of the things we should have agreed on early on. Yeah, it's. I have to admit that it's with these discussions, part of it is to really try and work out whether you want to make the game with the publisher, because for these kind of things, I think it's quite difficult to get like a contractual commitment, and as we all know, actually contracts, they don't really. At the end of the day, they can't make a publisher make a game in a particular way. It's very hard. Designers don't really get creative control generally, which is reasonable because the publisher's putting the money. But so it's kind of like pre-screening, right? You want to kind of like, you're checking to see like, do I agree with what the publisher wants to do? Of course, it's not a guarantee that they might not change their minds, but at least at the start, you kind of agree, you seem to be on the same page, and that's a good sign to go forward. You'll say with all their requests, one of my games became 8 times bigger than I wanted to be. That's the thing. Like it's that in itself is not a bad thing, but if it contradicts what you want, then that can be a real difficulty. So in these initial conversations, try and sound them out, see what they think of the game, even if you don't have necessarily really strong feelings. That maybe you don't, you're actually quite open to the game changing, or you don't have a strong feeling about like what the product should be or what the price point should be. But it's worth asking them, like, what are your plans for the game? How do you, what are you seeing for the components? Do you have an idea that you might want to change the theme? Another thing to talk about early on is where it will be published. This is obviously dependent on the publisher, because some publishers will typically only publish in one country, or some publishers will typically publish in multiple countries. This particular publisher it does distribute a lot of different countries, but it depends on their games. Not all of their games appear in all countries. So that's something we're also going to definitely talk about. I want to try and get as many assurances that the game will be released in as many countries as possible, because obviously that's the best chance for the game to do well, and you get the best chance of the most sales. and most people being able to play the game. It's also a game that is essentially language independent. So, it's a game that can do well in multiple countries. And this depends on the publisher. But again, it's worth asking, and if it's a publisher that doesn't tend to license out to, other languages, other countries, maybe it's worth having that conversation from the start and saying, do you have plans to go license it? Because that's something to think about when you're weighing up your decision. And, especially if you're ever in the situation where you have multiple publishers who want to publish a game, which I have been in the situation once or twice, which I'll get onto. I'm mid one thought here. That can be one thing that differentiates them. Like, where do they distribute? What's their plans to distribute? You can talk about print runs and things like that. How many do they think they'll print? Of course, again, these discussions, it's not contractual. Often you can't hold them to that, but at least you have a little bit of idea of what they want to do. And by all means, if you can get any of this into the contract, that's great. I'd really recommend that. Alex said, have you ever spoken to a designer about how it was working with a new to you publisher? Yeah, definitely. I would. Perfect point. So at the point where you're having this discussion with the publisher, reach out to other designers I think most designers, well, I can only speak for myself. I'm very happy to talk relatively candidly about any publishers I've worked with. I generally don't talk publicly about details. Sometimes contracts restrict exactly what you can say, like the actual percentages you're being paid and things like that. But I'm definitely happy to talk about my experiences working with them, maybe things to watch out for or things to ask about. So definitely reach out to people, and I'm happy to talk about it. And I think that's also something that should really, there is some collective power that maybe there's not formal bargaining power that we have as designers, but the very least we can do is share our information. And if there are bad practices, for example, manual, and that's the difficult thing in this industry. Nobody wants to be the bad person that goes out publicly and says publisher X did this thing and I never want to work with them again. The best sort of compromise I think we have is that designers, at least privately, can talk to each other and make sure that that you can try and ward people off these bad actors, because there are still some publishers who don't work that well or are disappointing for whatever reason. So definitely reach out, chat. You can reach out to me anytime. I think my DMs on Twitter are open. You can probably find my email out there. But do get in touch, or other designers would really recommend. Hi Paul, how are you going? Sorry, I find you. Where is Paul's thing? Hey, nice to see you. I'm well. I hope you're right. I hope you recovered after the virtual GridCon, which was amazing. Everyone check out. I think all the streams are probably online. I've definitely seen some of the videos, so check out Gaming Rules vids on YouTube. I think you've got all the video captures from the weekend. We did a playthrough of Roll for Adventure, actually, which I didn't plan for it to have on the. I'm just grabbing random boxes at this point, because I feel like I should have something in shot, but there's no plan. But we did a playthrough of Roll for Adventure, and we won, which was great. But that was a lot of fun. So thanks for that, Paul, and thanks for dropping that. Paul's asked, are we dishing dirt on bad publishers? Yeah, it's a funny thing. I don't know what the right answer is. It'd be interesting. Any designers or anyone in the chat, it'd be interesting to hear what you think. How public should you be when talking about publishers? You are going to burn some bridges, but actually you might also have the chance to, help other people not have a bad experience. I haven't had any experience yet, which would be a blanket, I would say, never ever work with this publisher, on any case. Most of the things are smaller things or project specific, or, that I wouldn't feel comfortable sort of blanket banning a publisher. But it's interesting. But reach out to designers. Usually much happier to talk in private and quite generous with the information, hopefully. Bass asks, at what time in your game development as a designer would you normally pitch it to publishers? I've chatted about this a little bit before in the stream. It's depends a bit on the game, but it is kind of getting earlier and earlier in the process. I think this is, I'm in a bit of a privileged position. I have a track record. I often have a good relationship with the publishers I'm pitching to. I pitch them, over many, many years. So it's a little bit different than if you were a designer without any published designs and you haven't met this publisher very often. I think if you don't know a publisher very well or you haven't met them, I would pitch something that is as finished as possible. This doesn't mean artwork or anything like that. It doesn't mean the components. It just means the mechanics and the rules to be as clear as possible. And that I think there's no one thing that you'll know when your game is finished. It's one of those sort of popular questions, like how do you know when a game is finished? I would just say, like, just like anything you do in a sort of professional sense, are you happy? Are you not proud, but are you happy if you put this out in the world? Like, you acknowledge it's not finished because, you know, it never ever is going to be, but you just want to be happy with what you're putting in front of that publisher. If you can stand by that, then I think that's a good enough measure. Sometimes also it's a little bit just, you have to make do with the opportunities you have. If you know there's an opportunity to meet a publisher at a particular time at a particular convention, that can hopefully spur you on to finish a design, but it also can just tell you, well, look, I could keep working on it, or I think it's good enough to show, let's do that. It was interesting, I was talking with my mentee this week, and I didn't realize this, but one thing I do when I pitch is I try and kind of like prime them when I introduce the game as, this is what I'm intending the game to be. This is what I'm aiming for. This is, you know, like with the Hitman game, when we showed it off, it'll be like, do you know the video game Hitman? We are trying to make an app hybrid game Hitman. That immediately primes a publisher. Hopefully they know the game, or you describe a genre or this sort of thing. And it also describes like the best possible case, like, and it describes what the final product could be also with the publisher development. And I think it helps put people in a mindset immediately to see like the best case scenario in the prototype that you show them. And if you're able to do that, then I think it helps also if the game itself is maybe a little bit rougher in terms, especially like visually. Sometimes, you know, as you could see on stream, my prototypes are not particularly amazing, but you know, it just helps them bring their own knowledge and their kind of interest in, and sort of piques their interest immediately to kind of see that, like, for me, it's all about like the game feel, and do the mechanics kind of support that, and hopefully that comes through. But yeah, it's definitely something that I do a bit earlier and earlier. Narrative games are kind of a special case because you know pretty quickly whether the concept works or not. You know, narrative games tend not to have a lot of rules. It's a lot more about the kind of content and the actual narrative arc, or the story you're going to tell, or the twists and things like that. And so it's much more about like what's like a minimum, really like a minimum mini scenario, or like a little demo that you can show, kind of show like, this is how the game would work. Here are some little twists that you could see, like cool moments in the game. So yeah, we don't design the whole scenario or anything like that, because, you know, you kind of want to get a publisher in as early as possible with those things, because they just take a lot more time to develop. And if a publisher isn't on board, especially anything with app. So with the Hitman thing, we're really trying to get a publisher involved as early as possible. And that's why we're going to show relatively early. The game that but on the other hand, like the one that I've just got offered not offered a contract, but, you know, that we're in discussions about, I've been designing that for about 6 months this year. I'd say it's a pretty regular, and like now the game I would consider to be finished, basically. Like I'd happily show it to anybody. I quite enjoy it actually myself. It's a bit of a rarity that I design a game that I could see myself playing regularly. So it depends on the project, depends on the publisher, and the less you know, I would say make sure that you try and make the game as finished as possible. But saying all of that, you know, what is the enemy of finished is perfection, or whatever. That I guess it's also knowing yourself. Are you a person that will generally like stall out on a project because you always want it to be perfect and you never finish, or you tend to be someone who shows things that like aren't finished enough? So you have to know where you fall on that scale, and then you know which way to like kind of fight against yourself. So if you know that you don't tend to finish things, then realize that you might be slightly uncomfortable showing a publisher a thing, because you're naturally going to feel that it's not finished. And get feedback from other people when you can. Like just chat to other designers. Just ask, like, you know, do you mind if I just show you, like, pitch you my game for 5 minutes or something like that, and just get a bit of feedback. And I think, again, most designers, I think, would be happy to do that. And I think that can really help. Hope that would help. Chats. Mandela talks about, I know Kinesia asked for rights to pursue localization himself if the company doesn't. I found this already built into a contract I was offered. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's true. That is definitely an aspect. Yeah, localization. Well, of course, should definitely be covered in the contract. Um, and it's up to you actually. It's if you would prefer yourself to pursue localization. I think Reiner's in like a very like particular position that he obviously has a lot of contacts with many publishers around the world, and he himself can get meetings, potentially can actually get meetings more easily than some of the publishers. But if you're not as big a designer, and I would put myself in this, often the publishers are going to have much better relationships with other publishers than you will. So I often trust them to do that work for me. But I also try to target publishers who I know are going to try and work with other people, and yeah, it's certainly something I look out for, and you should also in those kind of discussions. Paul said, based on all the bad stuff I've come across, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying in public. Yeah, it's absolutely fair enough, and I don't think we should ever, but he said would happily share privately with people I trust. Exactly. I think you don't want to encourage bad behavior. You want to be vigilant for people, but I don't think it necessarily calls for mudslinging, and it's always a bit tricky. Like you sometimes don't actually have the full story. Even really, it's not to say that there are bad situations, but yeah, it's always tricky, and it's hard to, once you get a reputation for somebody who is sort of like burning these bridges, it can be hard to get away from that, I guess. Hi, NG Crush, welcome. Does anyone know any abstract game publishers I can send a design to? I would recommend checking out Cardboard Edison should have a list. I was actually going to share that as part of this kind of, because they have a really great series. Well, it was more to do with contracts and things. So they have these amazing infographics about, signing games. They did these really great, oh, it looks like I can't. Oh, maybe I can. They did these great things about, things about advances. Basically, they survey lots of designers and collate that information. I think if anything, it's really great just to look over it, just to see about things to think about when you're thinking about contracts. But another thing that they have a publisher directory, which is here. I believe you have to access. You either have to support them on Patreon, or you can purchase like a one-time fee, and they have like 275 board game publishers. Other people in the chat might know abstract. For me, Gigamic in France is one that comes to mind immediately. I guess Plan B, with Next Move, you could call in some ways, Azul and their ilk are somewhat abstract. Thundergriff, a Spanish company, has done some sort of abstract-like sort of games. I don't know what kind of the size of abstract game you have, or so I checked. There's like Nestor games. I don't know if they take submissions from other people. Hopefully. Oh yeah, sorry, I should have just looked. Alex immediately talks about Gigamic. Jay talks about. Do you know if it puts off the publisher if the design has been publicly known? I'm considering broadcasting some of my designs, maybe even some of those that are not finished. I don't think so. In my experience, it's never really come up. I think, and because even when you broadcast the designs, I mean, people haven't played them. They'll, by the time it gets published, people have forgotten that they were ever seen by the like the 15 people watching a particular stream up to day. I think in us as designers, we generally don't have huge audiences, so I don't think it makes a difference. And even when you do have a huge audience, actually sometimes that can help, because a lot of people already know the game. You think about some of the best, say, like the print and play winners on Board Game Geek, or like Cardboard Edison, or things like that. Like, that's all kind of free publicity, that there are more people who already know about the game before it's even published, and actually publishers in some ways even see that as a positive thing. So yeah, I would definitely not worry about, from that point of view, I wouldn't worry about broadcasting your ideas. And actually sometimes that might even help you get a publisher for a game, because they might see you talking about it on stream. Even if it's not finished, they go like, oh, this is absolutely what we want. Okay, we want to work with you and help you develop it and everything. So, I don't know how people manage the stream or like the chat, if they manage to like read everything at the same time. But I answer a question and then it's like Manuel's come in and said, yeah, exactly as I said. I swear I said my answer before I read yours, Manuel, so sorry. Alex says, yeah, exactly the same thing. Like a lot of print and play games get picked up. And Rob blogs openly about works in progress. It doesn't really know. Oh, yeah, so they'd obviously read your blog and knew you were working on something. I think it's happened maybe once or twice. Again, I'm not that good on either being public. I mean, part of that is also because I'm co-designing with people, and so I don't want to step on toes, like, because I want to respect my co-designer, and I don't want to kind of assume for them. But yeah, I should maybe get a bit better at it, about doing that, I guess. Rob said he posted a photo of a prototype on Facebook and got messaged by a publisher who want to know about it. Yeah, so I think anything you can do, putting your work out there, I think is often a positive thing. And again, it's about, like, it might not be exactly the game the publisher wants, but then they get to know you. And they might meet with you in the future, or you can set up a meeting on other projects and things like that. So yeah. So I guess back the final, well, not the final bits about publishing, or just those discussions. Obviously royalties, yeah. So I recommend checking out the Cardboard Edison, these reports from Cardboard Edison. I think they summarize really well a lot of the different aspects to think about contracts. I guess today I'm not really talking about a lot about like contract terms. There are things obviously like thinking about royalties, thinking about what happens if the publisher goes out of business, or if they fail to publish the game within a particular time frame, or if sales of a game, when do rights return back to you. I'd say, like, yeah, kind of probably the most important parts of any contract should deal with obviously royalties, not only just the amount, but when are they going to get paid, how regularly are they paid. It should deal with how do you get the game back, and that should cover, them going out of business, them not selling the game, they're not publishing in the first place. That all of those should be time limited, like if they don't publish it within 2 years or whatever. So it's, those are important things, how you get the rights back, royalties, and yeah, and things like distributional how do they deal with co-licensing and things like that is always good to keep in mind. So yeah, I suppose I'm not going to, but I definitely direct anybody to check these out, to think about those things. And I don't know, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that you really should include in those in those initial discussions. And a lot of the times it's also sounding out, and I think, as Manuel was sort of talking about before, it's probably a good idea to also sound out, how does the publisher view your game in terms of how finished or how much work it requires? And that's a good thing to discuss before you sign as well. Like, do they see the game as finished and then they're going to develop them themselves? Related to like how much work you have to do is like, how are they going to develop the game? Do they have developers on staff? Are they going to work, are they going to work on it? Do they expect you to develop the game? Just trying to set those expectations in terms of what extra work needs to be done. Do they see that when you sign the contract, they'll take it, they're going to do the rest of the work? Check and see whether they're happy for you to check in and like keep getting information. It's sort of sounding about like what are those expectations they have in terms of how finished the game is and how much work they expect you to do on it. Because yeah, it can be awkward, I think, sometimes. When you sign a game and then the publisher requires you to do a lot of work on it. I strongly believe that, when you sign a game to a publisher, often it isn't finished, and it will require you to do some extra development because you're now developing it in a very specific direction that might have been different to how you were designing it in the first place, because now you have a specific publisher who has a specific audience. So that's fine, but obviously there's a limit there, and the more you can discuss beforehand. Again, it's hard to have a contract that's going to guarantee it, but at least you can get a sense of, can I work with these people? Do they seem reasonable? Can I? And at least if you have those discussions, then again, the more you can get included into the contract. I have seen clauses in the contract which says, the design has been delivered to the publisher, like the publisher acknowledges the design is delivered and it's being finished on the side of the designer. Having that kind of assurance is something that, like, again, like contracts are those things that they're good if things are going wrong. You can hopefully go back and say, what the problem is there. So I see there's some good stuff about PNP in the chat. Jay's talking about got some impression on publishers prefer to be secret about what's coming up. Yeah, I think it's a little bit different once you've signed the game, because then I think it becomes. You're right. Like publishers do have well, hopefully have a marketing strategy, and that often, the best marketing strategies, like they know, the times they want to first announce the game. It wants to be this amount of time before it's going to get released. Yeah, so once it's signed, I think that's when I'm much more careful about showing a game, because I don't want to interrupt those plans the publisher might have. I'd certainly discuss it with them, like, do you mind me talking about the game? And once they've announced the game, then I will follow the kind of information that's been released. So if a game has been announced and there's cover, then I'll start talking about it. I'll talk about it in general terms. If the rules have been announced, then I sort of take it at that point. I can pretty much talk about anything in the game, because the rules kind of contain what the game is. I try to match that, but before that point of where you sign, then do what you like. I think it's all the better to what you're doing. NJ Crush, thanks. Gigabit wasn't interested because it had a scoring system. Carbon Innocence is great. Yeah, so I would check out them. Probably you can be a patron even just for a month and get access in that month, which is $2. So I think it's probably the best forum for that. I'll try and think of if I know any other abstract publisher. And if anyone else in the chat knows, to let me know. Good point about the PvP. A lot of people remove access to Brunei once it's signed. Yeah, that's true. That might change once you sign. Often though, the game has changed like enough significantly in that process that even the two versions aren't compatible anymore. So it's not as much of a problem. Yeah, Rob got an instruction: block away, but don't talk about stuff that hasn't been decided yet. Yeah, I think that's a fair thing. Again, like, just have a dialogue. Just be respectful. It's a professional relationship. Have open lines of communication and ask, because actually for some publishers, they might actually love you talking about the game, even if they haven't announced things. They might think it's a great way that more people are going to hear about the game. So, there is no one rule for everything, and chat to the publisher and see what they think, I guess. Nicola, hey Nicola, how are you going? I've listened for a while, but couldn't log into chat for the connectivity error. Okay. Sorry to hear that. As someone who's just starting to pitch more consistently, I really appreciate the experiences everyone's sharing. Yeah, no, that's great. Maybe we'll have a stream about pitching. I've got a little ideas doc for future streams. So maybe we could talk about pitching and contracts terms. Anyone feel free to shout out topics, and I will actually remember to add to this rambling list of stuff I've got. Yeah, so I think that's kind of thing. So the sort of takeaway is that it's amazing that a publisher wants to sign your game, and that's a great thing. But don't forget that you do have some power to negotiate, and you absolutely are within your rights. And I think it's very reasonable to ask to discuss. Try to have a shared understanding of what plans for the game are, from a product point of view, from a design point of view, and from a contractual business point of view. The more information you get before you even enter into contract negotiations, then even better. And of course, when you're negotiating the contract, you can also be discussing about these things, and really take the time to chat with the publisher, because I think most publishers want you to be on board. Everyone wants to be on the same page, and it's much better to have those discussions before anything's signed than afterwards when it's a bit harder to do. Future topic, cake. Yeah. A little like improv now. You're doing a driving test. I don't get the. I don't know if I can do a driving test on stream. We can talk about cake. I once baked for my fiance's first birthday that we spent together. I baked her 3 different cakes for her birthday. The more complicated one was a bomb Alaska, which is you have a core of ice cream covered with sponge, and then flash baked meringue around that, which was probably the most complicated cake I've ever done. And I think it was lemon meringue and what was the other one? Chocolate or something like that. Cake is a jolly gorgeous coffee. Yeah. Jay, BGG for game designers. What would you say? What's the thing about BGG for game designers? Like how game designers should approach BGG, or like how we should use it, or something like that. Just feel free to what's the word? Oh gosh. To extend your thoughts. That's not the word, but yeah. At some point, your brain just stops working. I still don't know how people stream for like 6 hours straight or something. Like my brain would just be complete mush. I mean, it probably doesn't help that I'm often just winging it during these conversations. But yeah. Hey Rob, anytime I get asked about my social media, I say it's just pictures of bouillons cake. I mean, I think that's a perfect combination, actually. I'm really impressed with all your baking. It's really amazing. I'm a bit sad that I'm not making as much cake. I used to bake quite a bit, but for some reason I think I'm a little bit I'm also a little bit spoilt because I have a grandmother-in-law now. My grandparents died when I only knew my grandmother as she died when I was quite young, so I haven't really had a grandparent for a long time. But now that I'm in Czech Republic, my fiance's grandmother is your if you know the babushkas from Eurovision, she's not exactly like that, but she's almost like that a little bit. And she loves baking stuff. Like she's really generous, and she'll always bake us lots and lots of stuff. So like I'm not short of like baked goodies without me having to bake them myself. So I think if I started baking as well, I would just, especially with not necessarily going out of the house as much, I fear for my general health and well-being. But no, she's really lovely actually. It's really cute, and we can't really still talk to each other completely because my Czech is not to a level where it's understandable by some people. We have a uniquely difficult time understanding each other, even though my Czech isn't that terrible. But yeah. Bass, Matthew, did you already go into how you became a board game designer from being a scientist? If so, never mind the question. No. I mean, I haven't today. Yeah, I just I'm not sure if there was a specific like one leading to the other. They just sort of happened at the same time. So I started designing games when I was near the end of my undergraduate degree in Australia. I was really only in designing for like 6 months in Australia before I left to go to England. And yeah, I was just designing while I was a PhD student, I guess. And I started designing because I, started playing games. It's the most, it's funny. I don't know how many people listen to many board game design podcasts, and it's, hey, no worries. Thanks very much, Alex. Have an enjoyable dinner. Have some cake if you can. It's one of those stories that everyone says, I loved games and I played Settlers of Catan. I mean, but that is my story, unfortunately. Like, it's not a particularly exciting story. I played Settlers of Catan when I was 10 or something, and then I, got into games, and then I played more Bond games, and then I want to design games. So yeah, it's not a particularly exciting story, but they happened at the same time. And one of the things that was really lucky for me was that being a PhD student, it's not a full-time job in the sense that you have a lot of flexibility. My supervisor was super, super understanding. And, I can go to conventions, and I didn't have to take time off. And so it really enabled me to take the time to muck around with design without having any financial pressures, or I didn't have a lot of time pressures either. So that combination was really good. And I think also the other thing from the science side, there's two main things that stand out in my mind. One is that I think the scientific method is somewhat similar, to how you have to think about designing games. I always think about how many things am I changing in a game is how many different variables am I testing in an experiment, and you don't want to change too many things because then you can't understand what you're actually testing, and it's the same thing in the scientific method. When you design an experiment, you want to answer one specific question. You can't answer multiple questions in a single experiment because they'll sort of conflate each other and get complicated. So I think thinking about how you iterate, I think in some ways was probably, that my science background has influenced that. And the other thing I'd say is just project management. I think when you do a PhD, and indeed later on when you're I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher, you have to juggle lots of different projects, lots of different timeframes. I know this is not unique to being a scientist, but and you have to juggle also working with teams of people on each of those things, and everything you do is collaborative. So I think taking that sense of collaboration, I think I've been very used to in science doing that, and probably then very used to doing it in board games, and being able to manage lots of different projects at the same time, and kind of have the the tools and the sort of time management skills to be able to do that, it's especially important right now. Like, I think when you started as a designer, you're probably working on 1 or 2 games. Time management and project management is probably not that important, but when you have like 10 games going on and you have X games with publishers and different deadlines and things like that, I think at least I had that professional experience before, and that's really helped me out. So hope that answers your question. But always, and the other kind of cool thing I'm doing now is I'm doing some educational science games. So I helped design a game for the Diamond Light Source, which is a synchrotron in the UK, and that's to educate school children about the science that can be done at the synchrotron. And more, Pastor said more than enough. Please stop talking. And we did a pop-up escape room about the periodic table. So that's something also I'd love to do more stuff. Kind of bringing like game design back into kind of educational or science settings and things like that, which is quite cool. So yeah, I think I've probably been prattling along for long enough. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll probably be wrapping up in like 3 to 5 minutes. So, but happy to answer more questions if that's, especially if there are questions about discussions that people are having with publishers. I will reiterate, as I said before, I'm happy anyone to just reach out to me privately. I'll throw up my Twitter thing here. It's probably the easiest way. If you DM me on Twitter, I'm always happy to chat about specifically about contracts or about publishers. So yeah, just let me know. Happy to do that. Some excellent prattling, yes. Oh, well, thank you very much. It's been quite enjoyable and hopefully useful. But I think we're just always remember you're part of we're part of a community. I'm really glad that you're part of this small little burgeoning design community. And we've got each other, and so I've been very lucky and privileged that most of my interactions have been very, very positive in this industry. And there are some truly excellent individuals, including a lot of people in chat, or all of you in chat. So yeah, I think we can all help each other, and that's a really great thing. Maybe that's all a little too utopian thinking. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, I think with that, so as always, get in touch with me, Twitter, Wise Goldfish, anytime. I will be back to normal stream schedule, so I'll be back Monday, same time, same place. So look, see around which of us are some of you. Well, I recognize that there are probably some number of people watching that aren't necessarily present in chat. So everyone I see in chat are excellent folks, even though I've potentially never met you, but you've all been very, very kind. Paul says, next time visit Prague, I'll pop over. You can bake me a baked Alaska bowl. I will happily, or I'll take you. If you liked baked goods, there are some incredible new, they call them sukranas here, which are like, and it's funny because like sukra is sugar, so it's like literally like sugar baker or sugar shop, but it's like all the sweet bakery stuff in one thing. They even like have a separate thing separate to a normal bakery. So I will definitely take you to one of those, and you can have that. Great. Well, thank you all. Yeah, can we all come over? Well, yeah, maybe we can have a mini like a design. I've always wanted to like organize a design retreat. Maybe there's something else I'll talk about somewhere else. But yeah, it's a funny thing at the end. One thing I did for my lab that I also enjoy very much was organizing retreats for the lab to get away from the lab for 3 or 4 days to sort of get some distance from what you're doing and to kind of take a step back and like plan for the year. I know a lot of workplaces probably do like away days and things like this. My parents actually worked in, my father especially was in teacher development and training, and he would run these courses. It's a really interesting thing that I really enjoy. And one thing I'd always love to do with board game designers is, yeah, exactly, workshop, game jam, baking getaway. This is not actually a joke. It was, and I know in the US some people were doing it, but the idea is really to get away from, rent a big house somewhere. People can freely come and go. Bruno Fedudi, for example, does something like this. He has a sort of a gathering that I went to once. And yeah, it's amazing when you get away into a new kind of location, away from your normal ways of thinking. And when you're surrounded by people thinking about design, that it can be, it can just be really valuable and really like what is it, like inspirational kind of thing, because you think about things in different ways when you're in a different environment. And yeah, I would love to have something where it was sort of open. It wasn't all about playtesting necessarily. Like you can go off and work by yourself in a quiet corner, or we'd have a printer there and like prototyping things if you want to rapidly. If people want to start working with each other, I think that's something and also maybe through Playtest UK. I would have loved to do something like that. I'm not, obviously right now it's a bit difficult, but it's a future dream. So maybe we can. And in Prague, it's probably cheaper, so we can get something. I made jokes for this time. I wasn't really joking. Yeah, I really like them too, and I think it's a really great thing to be able to do. So we will forge ahead, but we'll put that in the kind of like to do in the future that we can't quite imagine yet, but that we all hope is coming. So, well, with that, thank you all for joining. It's been absolute pleasure chatting with you all. I hope, as I said, hope the prattling was nice, or at least a pleasant background noise for you to do whatever you like to do. I can fit in that. Maybe someone can remix me into a 10-hour, chili pop kind of playlist or something. I'm told I have quite a sonorous kind of like low enough voice. But I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. If anyone is a fantasy football fan, I'm going into this weekend. I'm 12-0 in my NFL fantasy football league. So everyone have their fingers crossed for me that I can complete the perfect preseason 13-0. I'm fingers crossed for that. And I will be back on Monday, same time, same place. Yeah. So thanks very much and take care, everyone. Have a nice weekend.